Before I unleash you to start reading our texts, I want to talk to you a little bit about reading, what it means to me, and what I expect when I assign you to read a text. I don't expect you simply to pass your eyes over every word, beginning with the first and ending at the last. It's perfectly possible to do that and then come to class, or in this case come to our forums or come to your homework assignments, with a very low level of understanding. No, I expect something much more involved. What I do, and what most experienced readers do, is very different from that. They start the text, get a little ways into it, and then go back to the beginning to reread. It's in the beginning of the text that we meet the characters, that we figure out where we are, what the setting is. We get our first sense of the tone and style and language of the author, and that's a lot to take in. And in literature, unlike life, we can go back and have that experience again. After rereading the beginning, experienced readers often pause while reading, look up from the text, go into their mind and connect their own experiences to the things in the text, ask themselves questions about the meaning or significance of what they've read, draw connections between something in the reading now and something in an earlier passage they read before. Experienced readers also stop to write things down. Now, I cannot stress this highly enough to you. I believe it is not possible to read well. It is not possible to read well unless you have a pen or a pencil in your hand and you are writing things down even as you read. Well, what are you writing? I'll start with underlining. Now, let me preface this by saying you might have been told way back in high school, don't write in your books. In the library, the librarian says, don't write in your books. In college, it is crucial that you write in your books, or if you're just not able to do that, to write in a notebook as you are reading. Writing is a necessary completion of the act of good reading. So what should you write? Start by underlining, but be very sparing and very intelligent and crafty about what you underline. My strategy, you could call it the Zack strategy, is to underline exactly this: the minimum amount of text to give you the maximum amount of recall when you go over your underlining. Now, I didn't figure this system out until I was a young teacher. I had a lot of classes to teach and a lot of different books, and when I would reteach a class, I would not always have time to reread the entire text. And so over several years, I developed this strategy of going through very carefully and figuring out the minimum number of words I could underline in a paragraph, so that in the few minutes before class, when it was coming time to teach this the next time, I could glance at those words and have as much come back as possible. I called it the 95-5 strategy. Underline 5% maybe of the paragraph, such that when looking over that, 95% of my original understanding would come back and I could walk into class ready to teach. I've since figured out that that is the best strategy I can recommend to you for being a good student. And when you try this strategy, you'll realize that it takes a lot of attention. You have to be reading very carefully in order to figure out what the main ideas are. You have to understand that passage pretty well in the first place to figure out what those crucial bits are that you need to underline. In addition to underlining, my second level of marking the text is circling. If there's one idea which just captures the subject, the significance of that paragraph, I will circle it. My third level of marking the text is actually symbols. This is going to be very useful for you once you see how our class works. Every time you have a reading assignment, you'll also have a writing assignment. I will give you reading questions that you will keep in mind as you do the reading. So, your first reading question, I believe, is Gilgamesh a good king? You might use a symbol of a crown in your margin and put that next to every passage in the text which has something to do with Gilgamesh as a king. After you've done the reading assignment, go back through those passages. That's your data. Figure out what generalization, what statement, what answer to the question best fits all of that data, and then you'll have all of the makings of a persuasive paragraph. And then here's the beautiful part. You'll be prepared for a high-level discussion of that question. But in order for us to reach a point where we can have that level of conversation, we all need to be active readers. So now we're going to do a short activity which will give you the opportunity to practice my 5-95% strategy, as well as to develop as an active reader. On the next slide in this presentation, you will find a paragraph of text. It's the second paragraph on page 16. And what I'd like you to do is open your book to page 16 if you have your book, and if not, you can just use the PowerPoint slide, and then to do the minimal underlining exercise. Here's what I came up with. First, I circled problems of understanding, because after going through the entire paragraph, I decided that was the main idea. And then I underlined the following words. Whole context of Gilgamesh lost. Names of the gods and humans, cities and lands, history vanished thousands of years. Story speaks to contemporary readers, yet a strangeness and remoteness. Gilgamesh, Enkidu, Utnapishtim, unknown outside of the poem itself. Notice that I did not underline any entire sentences, only important words and phrases and connective bits like that yet in the middle, so that I could go through and read the underlined parts and get back the main idea of the paragraph. Now your underlining at this point might look different from mine. There's no absolute right or wrong with this, but what I do expect is for you to develop your own system of underlining so that when it comes time to engage in a forum, or write a homework paragraph, or write a final exam, or even perhaps someday teach one of these interesting texts, that you can return to your underlining and in a very short period of time have the gist of that passage and the major details come flooding back into your mind.